Mik'lorb adjusted his third eye membrane as he stared at the application form hovering in the holographic display. From his cramped cubicle in the Centauri Collective's Interspecies Affairs Division, he could see dozens of other bureaucrats, just like him, all frantically processing paperwork for the galaxy's most mundane matters. 7 standard cycles in this department, and what did he have to show for it? A slightly larger desk lamp and an extra nutrient break on frost days. "Attention all personnel," announced the overhead speaker in the distinctly bored tone of Department Head Rex Nall. Reminder that applications for the quarterly human interaction certification close at the end of this solar rotation. That is all. Is all. Mik'lorb's antennae perked up. This was it, his chance to finally escape this soul-crushing mediocrity. Earth. The blue marble. The bizarre little planet that had somehow managed to turn the entire galactic community upside down. When humanity had first been discovered 50 cycles ago, everyone assumed they'd be just another primitive species to casually observe and eventually bring into the fold of galactic civilization. How spectacularly wrong that assessment had been. "Hey, you're not seriously considering applying for H, are you?" Mik'lorb from the neighboring cubicle leaned over, his 7 eye stalks blinking in perfect synchronization, a nervous habit Mik'lorb found incredibly irritating. "Why not? I've processed enough human cultural exchange requests to qualify," Mik'lorb replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Glorb's central mouth sphincter puckered in concern. "Don't you know? 6 applicants from our division have tried in the last 3 cycles. None of them passed." "Passed what exactly?" Mik'lorb asked, suddenly interested. The application details were notoriously vague. "The test," Mik'lorb whispered, as if uttering something forbidden. "The humans make you go through this elaborate evaluation. Nobody knows exactly what happens, but Exilin from accounts receivable came back missing a tentacle and refuses to talk about it." Mik'lorb scoffed, his diurnal scales flushing cyan with determination. "That's just office hearsay. Besides, dealing with humans would be my ticket out of here. Direct contact certification adds 16 points to my promotion eligibility score." The sad reality was that Mik'lorb had been passed over for promotion 3 times. Each time the position went to someone with specialized expertise, which was bureaucratic shorthand for has met a human in person. It was infuriating. How was anyone supposed to gain this seemingly magical qualification when Earth was designated as a restricted access planet? The humans, in their typical confounding fashion, had somehow negotiated an unprecedented arrangement with the Galactic Council. Any species wishing to send representatives to Earth or interact directly with humans had to pass their compatibility tests first. Not just any test, a test designed by humans themselves. It was unheard of. Usually advanced species set the terms for contact with developing planets, not the other way around. Mik'lorb scrolled through the application, his 4-fingered hand hovering over the submit button. "I wouldn't," came another voice. It was Plisex, the department's oldest employee, who claimed to have processed the very first human observation report. "Those humans are tricksters. The test isn't what you think it is." "Then what is it?" Mik'lorb asked, genuinely curious. Plisex leaned in conspiratorially. "Nobody knows for certain, but I've heard they make you consume something called Taco Bell while watching something called reality television. Ruxon from Diplomatic Corps tried it and was in the medical bay for 3 rotations." Mik'lorb's determination only grew stronger. If passing this mysterious test was the only way to advance his career, then so be it. Besides, humans couldn't be that incomprehensible. They were carbon-based bipeds who had barely achieved rudimentary space travel. How difficult could their compatibility test possibly be? "Application submitted," Mik'lorb announced, pressing the button with a flourish. The holographic display immediately shifted to show a rotating Earth symbol with text that made his central heart skip a beat. "Application accepted. Report to Sector 7, Human Relations Department, Terra Station, at 0800 tomorrow. Bring one change of clothes and something you consider humorous. Do not bring weapons, philosophy books, or dairy products." A mixture of excitement and dread washed over Mik'lorb. This was happening faster than he expected. Around him, His co-workers had fallen silent, staring at him with a mixture of awe and pity as if he'd just volunteered for ceremonial disembowelment. The department head Vrex now materialized next to his cubicle with unsettling suddenness. Well, Mik'lorb. Finally taking the plunge, I must say. I admire your courage, if not your judgment. The supervisor's face tentacles twisted into what might have been a smile. You know, I once considered taking the human compatibility test myself. Really? Why didn't you? Mik'lorb asked. Vrexnal's tentacles drooped slightly. I value my sanity too much. Just remember, Mik'lorb, if you succeed, there's a senior analyst position waiting for you. If you fail, the supervisor trailed off ominously. There's always data entry in the sub-basement. As Mik'lorb packed up his desk essentials, a notification pinged on his personal communicator. It was an automated message from the Human Relations Department. Congratulations on your application acceptance. Please be advised that the Human Compatibility Test has a 73.4% failure rate. The Centauri Collective is not responsible for any physical, psychological, or existential damage that may occur during testing procedures. Remember, humans are unpredictable. Good luck. For the first time since submitting his application, Mik'lorb felt a flicker of genuine fear. What exactly had he signed up for? Terra Station hung in space like an elaborate joke the humans had played on the galactic community. Unlike the sleek, efficient designs of most orbital facilities, it resembled a lopsided wedding cake with random protrusions and windows placed with apparent disregard for symmetry or purpose. Mik'lorb clutched his luggage closer as the transport shuttle docked, wondering why humans insisted on artificial gravity that was just slightly stronger than what most species found comfortable. First time? Asked the Vorjulian pilot, her translucent skin pulsing with amused light patterns. Is it that obvious? Mik'lorb muttered. Your antennae are sticking straight up. Dead giveaway. She chuckled. Word of advice. Don't stare at the humans. Don't mention their interesting biological inefficiencies. And whatever you do, don't try to explain how your civilization is superior. They hate that. The docking bay was a cacophony of sounds, smells, and activity. Mik'lorb followed the glowing path on his orientation tablet to the Human Relations Department. He passed several aliens looking distinctly traumatized. One Chronaxian was repeatedly mumbling something about karaoke night, while being escorted by medical staff. Application number? Demanded a bored-looking reptilian receptionist when Mik'lorb finally reached his destination. CR 7734B, Mik'lorb replied, trying to appear confident. The receptionist's forked tongue flicked out as she checked her screen. Ah, another Centaurian. You people never learn. She pressed a button. Officer Jenkins will see you now. Room 42. Room 42 was Spartan in its decoration, just a desk, 2 chairs, and a wall covered in what appeared to be Earth landscapes, and smiling humans doing inexplicable things like holding oversized fish or standing on mountain tops with their arms outstretched. Mr. Mik'lorb. A voice struggled from behind. Mik'lorb, he corrected, turning to face what he assumed would be an intimidating figure. Instead, he found himself looking at perhaps the most underwhelming human he could imagine. Officer Jenkins was of average height, with thinning brown hair, slightly hunched shoulders, and wearing what appeared to be the most forgettable outfit ever designed: beige pants and a light blue shirt with a small food stain near the collar. Right, sorry about that. Please have a seat. Jenkins gestured to the chair across from his desk. I see you've applied for human interaction certification. First time? Mik'lorb nodded, suddenly feeling like he was being sized up. Excellent. Always love first-timers. Such optimism. Jenkins smiled in a way that didn't quite reach his eyes. Now, before we begin the formal testing process, I just need you to fill out a few forms. A few turned out to be 73 different documents, ranging from the mundane, in case of accidental digestion by a human, who should we notify, to the bizarre, but please list all your species mating calls and their rough translations in Standard Galactic. Is this really necessary? Mik'lorb asked after an hour of increasingly absurd questions. Oh, absolutely, Jenkins replied without looking up from his tablet. Question 47 alone has eliminated 12% of applicants. It's a real-time saver. As Mik'lorb puzzled over describe your reaction to being told your reproductive organs resemble earth vegetables, the door burst open. A towering figure with emerald scales and 4 massive arms strode in, radiating the kind of confidence that made Mik'lorb instinctively want to hide under furniture. Jenkins. Good to see you again, you crafty little mammal, the creature boomed. Gresnik. Back for another attempt. Jenkins seemed genuinely pleased. Mik'lorb. This is Ambassador Gresnik from the Draconian Hegemony. Gresnik. This is Mik'lorb, first-time applicant. The enormous alien looked down at Mik'lorb with an expression that might have been pity. First time? How adorable. I'm on my 4th attempt myself. Almost passed last time, made it all the way to the sports bar simulation before the incident with the chicken wings. He shuddered visibly. Gresnik holds the current record for most attempts, Jenkins explained cheerfully. Most applicants give up after 2 failures. Because I understand the value of persistence, Gresnik announced proudly. The hegemony needs direct trade access to human culture. Their action movies alone are worth billions in the entertainment sector. Jenkins clapped his hands together. Well, now that you're both here, we can begin the preliminary screening. If you'll follow me to testing chamber A, we'll start with the physical compatibility assessment. As they walked down the corridor, Mik'lorb whispered to Gresnik, "Is it really that difficult?" The giant alien leaned down. The tests themselves aren't the hard part, it's figuring out what they're actually testing for. The humans never tell you the real rules. That doesn't sound fair, Mik'lorb protested. Fair? Gresnik let out a rumbling laugh. First lesson about humans, they invented games specifically designed to be unfair, then convinced themselves they're having fun playing them. They call it golf and Monopoly. Jenkins stopped at a massive door marked Testing Chamber A, Physical Assessment, and turned to face them with an unsettlingly wide smile. Gentlemen, your compatibility testing begins now. Remember, there are no wrong answers. He paused dramatically. Except for the ones that are catastrophically, hilariously wrong. Testing chamber resembled nothing so much as an earth kitchen fused with a medical examination room. Countertops lined the walls, filled with mysterious devices and containers. A central island held what appeared to be food items, while medical monitoring equipment hung from the ceiling. Welcome to Phase 1, Jenkins announced, donning what he called an apron but Mik'lorb recognized as primitive body armor. The physical compatibility assessment. Is that actual Earth cuisine? Gresnik asked, forearms twitching nervously. Indeed it is. You see, gentlemen, one of the most important aspects of interspecies relations is the sharing of meals. Humans consider breaking bread together an essential bonding ritual. Jenkins gestured proudly at the spread. Today's selection includes items from various human cultural traditions. Mik'lorb eyed the colorful array with suspicion. His species was omnivorous, but the items before him defied categorization. Some appeared to be partially decomposed, others emitted noxious vapors, and a few were actively moving. We'll start with something simple, Jenkins said, lifting a small white cup. This is called yogurt, a deliberately spoiled mammary secretion that humans enjoy consuming at all stages of life. Both aliens instinctively took a step back. You want us to consume intentionally spoiled bodily fluids? Mik'lorb asked, his voice rising an octave. That's correct. And it's just the beginning, Jenkins beamed. After that, we have fermented grape juice that causes mild neurotoxicity, beans that have been burned beyond recognition, then ground into powder and mixed with hot water, and the partially developed reproductive organs of various plants. Gresnik leaned toward Mik'lorb. The trick is to disable your olfactory sensors and just power through it, he whispered. I've been practicing with my species equivalent of their hot sauce for months. A small robotic assistant floated into the room carrying what appeared to be medical equipment. Oh yes, we'll be monitoring your physiological reactions throughout the tasting, Jenkins explained. Don't worry about having an adverse reaction. Our medical team can usually prevent permanent damage. Usually? Mik'lorb squeaked. Now then, who wants to go first? Jenkins held out the yogurt cup with an expectant smile. To Mik'lorb's surprise, Gresnik stepped forward confidently. I'll demonstrate how it's done, he announced, taking the cup and examining it carefully. What followed was one of the most disturbing displays of cross-species consumption Mik'lorb had ever witnessed. The massive reptilian somehow managed to disable his gag reflex, consume the entire cup of yogurt, and maintain eye contact with Jenkins throughout the process. Excellent form, Gresnik. Jenkins praised, making notes on his tablet, though you did turn a concerning shade of purple for a moment there. Gresnik smiled weakly, his scales now indeed sporting a faint purple tinge. I hardly noticed. Delicious, actually. Reminds me of, well, nothing in my experience, which is what makes it so unique. Mik'lorb reluctantly took his turn next, discovering that his species had an unexpected tolerance for coffee, but reacted to sourdough bread with an embarrassing bout of spontaneous bioluminescence. Fascinating reaction. Jenkins noted as Mik'lorb glowed bright blue, much better than last cycle's Arcturian, who detonated his methane pouches after trying horseradish. After the food trials came environmental testing. The aliens were subjected to various Earth conditions: the roar of rush-hour traffic, the discordant sounds of amateur karaoke, and the peculiar experience of standing in line at the DMV. I don't understand the purpose of this, Mik'lorb complained after 20 minutes of simulated waiting. Nothing is happening. Exactly, Jenkins replied, looking genuinely pleased. You've identified the core experience. The final physical test involved exposure to Earth entertainment media. They were seated in front of a large screen and subjected to something called a reality TV marathon. These humans are competing to find a reproductive partner. Mik'lorb asked, genuinely confused, but they seem to actively dislike each other. Gresnik nodded sagely. Human mating rituals are deeply counterintuitive. In my research, I've discovered they often express attraction through behaviors that mimic hostility. Jenkins watched them closely throughout, making constant notes on his tablet. After 3 hours of increasingly bizarre programming, he finally shut off the screen. Well, gentlemen, you've both survived Phase 1. Congratulations, that puts you ahead of 30% of applicants already. That wasn't so difficult, Mik'lorb said, feeling a new surge of confidence despite still faintly glowing from the sourdough incident. Oh, we were just warming up, Jenkins replied with a thin smile. The cultural and psychological assessments are where things get interesting. As they were escorted to the next testing chamber, Mik'lorb noticed another alien being carried out on a stretcher, mumbling incoherently about something called TikTok dances. What happened to him? Mik'lorb asked. Phase 3 failure, Gresnik replied grimly. Poor soul probably tried to apply logic to human social media behavior. Indeed, Jenkins confirmed cheerfully, a common mistake. Now then, who's ready for the language assessment? Fair warning, this section includes understanding sarcasm, detecting passive aggression, and interpreting the phrase "I'm fine" with 97% accuracy. For the first time, Mik'lorb saw genuine fear cross Gresnik's scaly face. Perhaps this test was going to be more challenging than he thought. Testing Chamber B looked suspiciously like an Earth cafe, complete with uncomfortable wooden chairs, unnecessarily complicated menu boards, this and that distinct aroma of overpriced beverages. Jenkins stood behind what appeared to be a counter, wearing a green apron and a name tag that read Jeff. Welcome to your psychological evaluation, Jenkins announced. This simulation is called the Morning Coffee Rush. You will each take turns playing the role of customer and barista, while I evaluate your responses to typical human interaction patterns. I've prepared extensively for this, Gresnik said, pulling a small notebook from one of his many pockets. I've memorized 16 different coffee preparation methods and 23 milk alternatives. Mik'lorb felt woefully unprepared by comparison. He'd processed paperwork about human beverages, but had never actually studied their bizarre obsession with bean water. "Gresnik, you'll be the customer first," Jenkins instructed. "Mik'lorb, behind the counter with me." As Mik'lorb took his position, Jenkins whispered, "Remember, the customer is always right, except when they're catastrophically wrong. In which case you must correct them while making them believe it was their idea all along." "That's logically impossible," Mik'lorb protested. "Welcome to human customer service," Jenkins replied with a grin. "Oh, and you must maintain a smile at all times, regardless of how you're actually feeling." Gresnik approached the counter with the confident stride of someone who had indeed studied for this moment. "Good morning," he began formally. "I would like a venti half-calf soy latte at precisely 73 degrees Celsius with a double pump of sugar-free vanilla, but only 1.5 pumps of caramel, extra foam but not too extra, and a sprinkle of cinnamon in the shape of my home constellation." Mik'lorb stared blankly. "Well?" Jenkins prompted. "Take his order. Is that even a beverage?" Mik'lorb finally managed. Jenkins scribbled something on his tablet that looked suspiciously like failure to adapt. Gresnik smiled smugly. "And I have a reward coupon," he added, sliding forward a crumpled piece of paper. "The coupon expired yesterday," Jenkins whispered to Mik'lorb. "This is a test of conflict resolution." What followed was 10 excruciating minutes of Mik'lorb attempting to navigate the incomprehensible maze of human customer service expectations. By the end, his smile muscles were cramping, and he'd somehow agreed to give Gresnik a free pastry that didn't even exist on the menu. When it was Mik'lorb's turn to be the customer, he tried a simpler approach. "I would like a black coffee, please." Jenkins and Gresnik exchanged looks of surprise. "Just black coffee? No modifications? No complaints about the temperature or cup size?" Gresnik seemed genuinely confused. "Yes, simple black coffee." Jenkins made another note on his tablet while Gresnik prepared the order with suspicious efficiency. When he handed over the cup, Jenkins intervened. "Excellent. Now, Mik'lorb, please demonstrate the appropriate human reaction when receiving a beverage that is exactly what you ordered." Mik'lorb took a sip and nodded. "Thank you, this is adequate." "But," Jenkins sighed dramatically. No. Where's the performative satisfaction? The exaggerated sigh of pleasure? The obligatory comment about how this is exactly what you needed?" After several more rounds of increasingly complex social scenarios, Jenkins finally called a halt to the exercise. "Let's move on to the humor assessment," he announced, leading them to a smaller room with just 3 chairs arranged in a circle. Understanding human humor is critical to successful interaction. Many diplomatic incidents have resulted from misinterpreted jokes. "My species doesn't have humor," Gresnik stated flatly. "Everyone says that until they accidentally make a human laugh," Jenkins replied. "Now I'm going to tell some jokes, and you'll explain why they're funny. Ready?" What followed was an excruciating hour of increasingly baffling humor exercises, that made no sense, references to cultural phenomena neither alien understood, and lengthy anecdotes with anticlimactic punchlines. "Why did the chicken cross the road?" Jenkins asked for the 3rd time. "We've established that I don't know," Mik'lorb said irritably. "But I maintain that the question is fundamentally flawed. Without understanding chicken motivation, how can anyone provide a definitive answer?" To his surprise, Jenkins burst out laughing. "Perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for." "But I wasn't attempting humor," Mik'lorb protested. "Even better." Jenkins made an enthusiastic note. As they were escorted to the next chamber, Mik'lorb noticed a wall covered with photographs of aliens alongside humans. Some were shaking hands, others appeared to be engaged in recreational activities. These, presumably, were the successful applicants. "Is that crying?" Gresnik suddenly asked, pointing to a maintenance closet they were passing. Mik'lorb listened carefully. There was indeed a soft sobbing coming from behind the door. Jenkins coughed uncomfortably. Just a previous applicant taking a moment to process their experience. Nothing to worry about. "How long has he been in there?" Mik'lorb asked. Only about 3 cycles, Jenkins admitted. He had a particularly traumatic experience during the explaining social media to your grandparents simulation. As they continued down the corridor, Mik'lorb wondered if pursuit of a promotion was really worth all this. Then again, he'd made it this far further than many colleagues. Perhaps there was hope after all. The final phase coming up, Jenkins announced cheerfully. I hope you're both ready for the dinner party simulation. Testing Chamber C was designed to resemble an Earth suburban home, complete with mismatched furniture, inexplicable decorative pillows that served no practical purpose, and walls covered in framed photographs of humans Mik'lorb didn't recognize. The centerpiece was a large table set for what Jenkins called a casual dinner party with friends, though the elaborate array of utensils suggested nothing casual about it. The dinner party simulation is where 62% of remaining applicants fail, Jenkins explained, adjusting a flower arrangement that appeared to be deliberately dying in a vase. It combines all elements of human social interaction into one high-pressure scenario. Sounds straightforward enough, Mik'lorb said, attempting confidence. We just consume nutrients together. Jenkins laughed as if Mik'lorb had said something hilariously naive. Oh, if only it were that simple. You'll be interacting with our trained human actors playing various roles. You must navigate conversation topics, respect implicit social boundaries, correctly interpret passive-aggressive comments, and remember not to discuss religion, politics, or the objectively correct way to load a dishwasher. The dishwasher is a particularly contentious topic, Gresnik whispered to Mik'lorb. My research indicates humans will engage in mate-threatening conflicts over the proper orientation of eating utensils. 5 humans entered the room, each wearing name tags and plastered on smiles that Mik'lorb now recognized as the universal human indicator of social discomfort. These are your dinner companions, Jenkins introduced, and Mark and Jessica, the hosts. Brad, the college friend with controversial opinions. Emma, who just went through a breakup and might cry at any moment. And Taylor, who will constantly reference cultural events you don't understand. What are our objectives? Gresnik asked, his 4 hands fidgeting nervously. Survive the evening without committing any unforgivable social faux pas, Jenkins replied cheerfully. Oh, and you've each brought a dish to share. Gresnik, you've brought a casserole. Mik'lorb, you've brought, let's say, a fruit salad. But I haven't prepared any, Mik'lorb began. It's a simulation, Jenkins interrupted. Just pretend. What followed was the most stressful 3 hours of Mik'lorb's existence. The humans engaged in a bewildering dance of conversation that seemed designed specifically to trap the unwary. Topics shifted without warning, inside jokes were referenced with no explanation, and subtle digs were disguised as compliments. So, what do you think about the current situation? Brad asked Mik'lorb during the appetizer course. Which situation specifically? Mik'lorb asked cautiously. You know, the situation, Brad replied with significant emphasis. Everyone at the table fell silent, watching Mik'lorb expectantly. Jenkins stood in the corner, tablet poised to record his response. I think it's very complex, Mik'lorb ventured, and with valid perspectives on multiple sides. The humans exchanged glances before Jessica laughed lightly. Well said. Who wants more wine? Crisis averted, though Mik'lorb had no idea how. Gresnik was faring better, his extensive preparation evident as he skillfully deflected Taylor's obscure references and even managed to comfort Emma when she inevitably began crying into her dessert. The massive alien pat her shoulder with surprising gentleness, while offering platitudes about plenty of fish that seemed to make her cry harder yet somehow seemed to be the correct response. As the simulation progressed, Mik'lorb began noticing patterns. The humans weren't testing specific knowledge, they were evaluating adaptability and emotional intelligence. It wasn't about having the right answers, but about handling uncertainty with grace. During a bathroom break, another strange human custom announcing temporary departure to excrete waste, Mik'lorb made a startling discovery. Through the partially open door of a home office, he spotted a display showing surveillance footage of previous tests. What caught his attention wasn't the footage itself, but the labels, threat assessment, defense response evaluation, and psychological warfare resistance. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. These weren't compatibility tests, they were threat assessment protocols. When Mik'lorb returned to the dinner table, he observed the proceedings with new eyes. The awkward silences, the probing questions, the deliberate social traps, all designed to stress-test alien species for potential vulnerabilities. Humans weren't testing whether aliens could adapt to them. They were evaluating whether aliens posed a danger. And that's when I told my boss exactly what I thought about his management style. Mark was saying, finishing what was apparently a humorous anecdote. Everyone laughed on cue, even Gresnik, who had perfectly mimicked human laughter down to the slight wheeze at the end. Fascinating approach, Mik'lorb said, deciding to test his theory. Humans seem remarkably comfortable with confrontation. Oh, we avoid it when possible, Jessica responded with a dismissive wave. Do you? Mik'lorb pressed. Your entertainment glorifies it, your social structures incentivize it. Even this dinner party simulation is designed to create and observe micro-confrontations. The room fell silent. Jenkins looked up sharply from his tablet. What an interesting observation, Emma said finally. More wine? Anyone? But Mik'lorb had seen Jenkins's reaction. His theory was correct. The tests weren't about compatibility, they were about humanity protecting itself. The realization was as stunning as it was obvious. Humans weren't the naive newcomers to galactic society everyone assumed them to be. They were careful, calculating, and far more perceptive than anyone had given them credit for. As the dinner party simulation wound down, Mik'lorb caught Gresnik watching him with newfound respect. The reptilian leaned over and whispered, "You figured it out, didn't you?" Mik'lorb nodded slightly. "Took me 3 attempts," Gresnik admitted. "The question is, what will you do with this knowledge?" As the dinner party simulation concluded, Jenkins led Mik'lorb and Gresnik to a small, sterile conference room. Gone was the friendly bureaucrat facade. Jenkins now carried himself with the alert posture of someone who had spent significant time in military service. "Well, gentlemen, you've both completed all phases of testing," Jenkins said, sitting across from them. "Before we discuss your results, do either of you have any questions?" Mik'lorb and Gresnik exchanged glances. "I do," Mik'lorb said, deciding to take a risk. "These aren't compatibility tests at all, are they?" They're threat assessments." Jenkins's expression remained neutral, but his posture stiffened slightly. "What makes you say that?" "The tests don't measure how well we understand humans, they measure how humans can manipulate our emotional and psychological responses," Mik'lorb explained. "You're evaluating which species might pose threats to Earth by seeing how we react under stress, confusion, and social pressure." A slow smile spread across Jenkins's face. "Interesting theory." "It's not a theory," Gresnik interjected. "It took me 3 failures to understand it. Humans aren't the technological primitives we assumed. You're using the one advantage you have, your psychological complexity, as both a shield and a weapon." Jenkins leaned back, examining them both with new intensity. "And how does that make you feel?" "Impressed," Mik'lorb admitted. While the galactic community was dismissing humans as simplistic bipeds who'd barely achieved space travel, you were quietly building the most sophisticated psychological screening program in known space. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. The yogurt and coffee were unnecessary cruelty, though, Gresnik added with a grimace. Jenkins chuckled. "Those actually serve a purpose. Species that can't handle our food often can't handle our thoughts either. Biological tolerance correlates strongly with psychological flexibility." He stood up and paced the room. "You're both correct. These tests aren't about compatibility, not primarily anyway. But why the charade?" Mik'lorb asked. "Why not just admit you're conducting security screenings?" "Because the test itself is part of the assessment," Jenkins replied. "Species who believe they're simply proving their understanding of humans behave differently than those who know they're being evaluated as threats. And frankly, the rest of the galaxy has a certain arrogance problem when it comes to humanity. So all this secrecy is just to protect Earth." Gresnik asked. Jenkins laughed outright. Protect Earth? No, Ambassador Gresnik. It's to protect the rest of you. Both aliens stared at him in confusion. Humans aren't fragile newcomers needing protection from advanced civilizations, Jenkins explained. We're a psychologically volatile, remarkably adaptable, and pathologically curious species with a historical tendency to overreact when encountering new cultures. These tests identify which species can handle exposure to humanity without suffering cultural shock, existential crisis, or developing unhealthy obsessions with our entertainment media. Wait, Mik'lorb said slowly. You're screening us to protect other species from humans? Precisely, Jenkins nodded. Did you know the Rigelian Philosophy Council collapsed after being exposed to human reality television? Or that the Proximum Harmony suffered a 300-year cultural regression after discovering human competitive eating contests? Not everyone out there is ready for the full human experience. Jenkins tapped something on his tablet, and a holographic display appeared showing thousands of worlds categorized by human exposure readiness. Earth isn't under quarantine, it's under containment, Jenkins continued. These tests identify which species have the psychological resilience to engage with humans without suffering civilization-threatening consequences. Mik'lorb was stunned. The entire galactic narrative about humans had been backwards. So, did we pass? Gresnik asked hesitantly. Jenkins smiled. Ambassador Gresnik, you've demonstrated remarkable adaptability and preparation. However, your species shows concerning signs of potential cultural overadoption. The risk of your civilization abandoning centuries of tradition to emulate human game shows is too high. We recommend limited cultural exchange with careful monitoring. Gresnik deflated visibly, all four arms drooping. And me? Mik'lorb asked. You, Mik'lorb, demonstrated something much more valuable: critical insight. You didn't just adapt to our tests, you questioned their very nature. The Centauri Collective demonstrates promising resistance to human cultural dominance while maintaining curiosity. Jenkins extended his hand. Congratulations. You've been approved for full human interaction certification with a recommendation for diplomatic service. As they shook hands, Jenkins added, we believe the Centauri Collective could actually help moderate humanity's influence on more vulnerable species. Would that interest you? 6 months later, Mik'lorb sat in his new office in the Galactic Relations Department's Human Interface Division. His job title, Interspecies Cultural Buffer, came with the promised promotion, a larger office, and the unexpected responsibility of helping screen other species for human readiness. A notification chimed on his console, another application from the draconian hegemony, Gresnik's 5th attempt. Mik'lorb smiled. On his wall hung a framed certificate of completion from the Human Compatibility Program. Next to a small shelf holding Earth artifacts, a coffee mug, a collection of dad jokes, and a small jar of yogurt kept as a reminder of how appearances could be deceiving. The most dangerous species in the galaxy wasn't the one with the most advanced technology or the most powerful weapons. It was the one that could make you question your own civilization after a single dinner party. Humans weren't being protected from the galaxy was being protected from humans, and now Mik'lorb was part of that protection program. He opened Gresnik's application and began reviewing it with newfound understanding. Perhaps this time the ambitious draconian would finally see what Mik'lorb had discovered, that passing the test wasn't about understanding humans. It was about understanding yourself.